Welcome back to our Meat Market Minutes. Today we're going to have our session on lamb. Dr. Andrew Griffith from the University of Tennessee is going to talk to us a little bit about the goings on in the lamb market. So I'll go ahead and toss it over to you. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Justin, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about the lamb market. This is Meat Market Minutes, and so the focus is supposed to be on the meat market as opposed to the production side. So the end of the production and start of the meat comes down to lamb slaughter. So, if we think about the traditional lamb system, it's very similar to beef production from the standpoint of we grow these lambs to a certain age, and then we put them in a feedlot. And the problem that we ran into are the news that has been groundbreaking, shattering, whatever you want to, was the closure of the Mountain State Rosin plant in Greeley. That was formerly owned by JBS. Then it was bought out by a cooperative. They serve about 15 states, and they were killing about 350 lambs annually. They went bankrupt. JBS has bought that facility back. They're now changing that over to a further beef processing facility. And since the announcement of that closing, there has been an announcement of an opening of a facility called Double J Lamb in San Angelo, Texas. Now, I think there's a lot of self-interest probably in the opening of this facility. There's some plans to harvest about 200,000 lambs annually at this facility, and it's going to be operated by the Hasbrook family. But they're actually a feeding family. They feed several probably 150 to 200,000 lambs a year, as it is already. I think they have a lamb feeding facility in Colorado. So those folks probably have some of their own interest in reopening this San Angelo facility. So when you think about the closure of one facility, the reopening of another facility, we may be able to keep production of lamb pretty constant if we get this new facility open. But let's just look at commercial lamb and mutton production, pretty much on par with where we think it should be. As far as compared to year-ago levels, we had a spike back in the April and May time period of a year ago. This year, we obviously saw a little dip because of the coronavirus mess, but nothing to get too excited about relative to if you think about the bigger industries of pork and beef. We didn't see nearly the change in that production on the lamb and mutton side. It's also kind of important to show what cold storage is. That tells us if things are getting backed up or not. Sometimes we have things get backed up. When cold storage starts to increase, we start to wonder what's happening with the market and why aren't we moving this product. In the lamb industry, that's pretty severe, because if you start seeing an increase in cold storage, well, then all of a sudden you're probably going to start seeing some animals start to back up in the feedlots as well, and at some point that lamb becomes mutton. You can't just keep feeding them because age is really what determines if it's going to be lamb or mutton. And so that can hurt prices if some of those lambs turn into mutton and then you try to sell it as lamb and then it's not as high quality as what the consumer's expecting. The lamb cutout value was moving really, really strong up into April, and then when coronavirus really took hold of the entire country, things took a hit. We've pretty much been above year-ago price levels as far as the national lamb cutout value is concerned. So that has probably been a very positive thing for most in the sheep industry. But that means that at the end of the day, that retail price of that lamb is pretty strong as well, and so the consumer is competing to eat that product and having to spend their dollars to do that. The shoulder prices have been very, very steady throughout the first 9 months of the year, or first 8.5 months, I should say. That's probably more appropriate. I would assume that they would probably continue to be very steady, sitting around that $325 per hundredweight price moving through the end of the year. We might have a slight run up in prices, but I doubt we're going to see anything major in the box lamb shoulder prices. Uh, leg prices, just sporadic all over the place. I would expect leg prices to show a little strength in the moving into that fourth quarter of the year, mainly in the probably the last month and a half of the year as we go into the holiday season. A lot of lamb leg movement during that time, and consumers looking for legs instead of, not everybody eats ribeyes and hams at Christmas. There are people that eat other things, so probably see a good movement as we head into the holiday season for legs. Now here's where we have a dichotomy of what's going on, and I'm not sure I have a great explanation for this. I wish. I mean, I deal in the lamb market a little bit, enough to be able to talk about it somewhat sensibly. But loin prices have just taken off tremendously in the past 2 months, and I'm not sure that at this point, I don't know how high they may go, and I don't know fully what's driving that price. But they've been very, very strong. If you compare it to last year, you can see how steady year ago prices were with the dotted line for 2019. And that was very much in line with what the 5-year average would have been from 2014 to 2018. And this year, we've just, ever since we bottomed out back in May, prices have really taken off, and who knows when it'll finally turn around. The dichotomy comes when you look at rack prices, probably the most highly valued product in the lamb, and we've lost essentially about $100 or $1 a pound on that product, and going just the opposite way that loin prices are going. And so it's really hard to fully understand why we have those going in opposite directions at a time when we wouldn't necessarily expect that. I don't think rack prices will move much lower than where they are. I think we'll stay above the 850 price range and probably be flat for most of the rest of the year. So I guess with that must have been the end.
Great. Well, thank you, Andrew. Does anybody have any questions on the lamb market?
And do you think there's any correlation between your loin prices increasing and kind of when restaurants are starting to come back online with lamb chops and things like that?
Say that again, James. I missed the front half of that.
Do you think there's any association between the run up in loin prices and our restaurants coming back online and kind of our nicer restaurants with lamb chops and things like that?
There definitely could be some correlation there. The issue is a lot, even with the reopening of some of these places, a lot of them are at limited seating capacity still, so their demand is still from a restaurant perspective, it's still not that strong. And so I'm not saying that it's not part of it, because it definitely could be and probably should be. But we do generally see lamb consumed at the restaurant level. Not as much of it going through the grocery stores. Maybe in Texas there's a lot of lamb sitting on the meat counter, but when you come to Tennessee and most of the Southeast and you in Arkansas, you don't see a whole lot of lamb sitting at on the meat counter. So James, that might very well be the case. I just don't have a good explanation for all of it.
I'm just spitballing, but could it possibly be, as you're talking about those restaurants reopening? I don't know. Are loin chops per pound typically cheaper than a rack, right? Do you think?
Yes.
Maybe those restaurants are trying to purchase a cheaper product and move cheaper product rather than going a whole hog on an expensive product they may not move. I don't know either. I'm curious.
Well, the thing is I would say most of these places have minimum quantities that they're going to have to purchase of a product, right? And if you have limited seating capacity, you don't expect to move as much product because of a limited seating capacity. So there might be some of that as well, Justin, from the standpoint of, hey, we're going to buy a little bit lower value product, and if we have to throw some out, we're not at as big a loss. And a lot of times the lower valued products end up being some of the higher margin products than those really high valued cuts.
I wonder, particularly if with lamb, you know, not as many people know as much about lamb. So if you can still market that loin chop as a high value restaurant product, and people don't really understand the difference in a rack versus a loin chop, if maybe they're taking advantage of that. Just spitballing again, I haven't been in a restaurant and had lamb.
No, I would say you're right. I would say a large percentage of consumers, if you just put the word lamb on there, on a menu, it wouldn't matter what that product is. They wouldn't know the difference in most of them unless they eat lamb regularly. And so just the fact of eating lamb would probably be pretty exciting regardless of what cut it was for most consumers. And especially, I think this kind of might go back to some of what James, you know, there's probably some pent up demand for lamb, just like there generally is for beef when we run into a situation like this. Because if you really like lamb, and the time or two that I've had it, I mean, it is a delicious product. I mean, I like lamb. I just can't afford to eat it. You know, it's just what it is. And so the people that really enjoy eating it, you know, this kind of goes back to what James is saying. It very well could be that my goodness, when the restaurants did open, that's what those people wanted to eat. And so they got in there in a hurry and they started ordering lamb, and that really, you know, put a pull on that product.
Great. Does anybody else have any questions? Very good. Well, if not, we appreciate it, Andrew. Thanks for all your insight.